The book I'm reviewing is called The Hate You Give and was written by Angie Thomas and published on February 28, 2017. Now, this book is a work of fiction focused on one social issue: racism. I do not have a physical copy of this book, but I will add a link to the digital one that I read underneath this video. So, in The Hate You Give, we follow our main character, Star Amara Carter, who is a 16-year-old Black female. She lives in two separate worlds. One of them is Garden Heights, the primarily Black and ghetto neighborhood. The other world is of her high school, Williamson Prep, the primarily white and inhabited by rich kids. This story starts off when Star decides to catch up with an old family friend of hers, Khalil Harris, and witnesses a police officer wrongly murder him. Being the sole witness, Star's family try their best to keep her identity as the witness a secret, and the police use this and try to utilize her silence to push forward excuses and justifications for Khalil's murder. Secrets and friends and gangs and protests and more fill this book, making it truly a bestseller. The Hate You Give showcases an inspiring story of how 16-year-old Star fights injustice and racism in her own town. Personally, I found this book to be very entertaining and informative. I'm not entirely sure when it was that I got hooked, but after I had gotten hooked, I've struggled a lot to keep myself from reading extra chapters. I think that the reason I wasn't as interested in the book in the beginning was because it reminded me of some things that I didn't want to think about, and some things that I had recently moved on in. And reading those chapters brought back emotions that I didn't want to or really have the time to deal with after each chapter. But after I got over the chapters of Star dealing with her early stages of grief, I found it really hard to put the book down. The entire story was constructed in a way that was so easy to understand and relatable. There was so much that happened in the story that some pieces felt a bit random, but then I saw them fit together like a perfect puzzle, and it really felt satisfying. I also found that the resolution of this book felt very suitable, if that makes sense. It also might not strike you as the type, but this book does have a lot of action in it. In my opinion, this book was worth all the hours I spent reading it. I was captivated by the story and learned so much. Early in the summer of 2020, there were many protests going on in George Floyd's name. If you don't know George Floyd, he was a Black man in his 40s who was recently killed by a police officer, Derek Chauvin, via chokehold. I understood somewhat of what was going on, but it still wasn't very clear to me. My confusion only grew, and then when I read this book, I felt very educated, if that makes sense. It really showed me what it's like to be living in a Black community, and it showed me the relationship with the police. After reading this book, I was much more enlightened, and when learning about other cases similar to Floyd's, I found that I was able to understand things much better. If you want to learn more about racism in the United States, or want to better understand the protests and riots happening amidst the pandemic, then I'd suggest you read this book. This book does have some more mature themes, such as murder, for example, and so I wouldn't suggest it to younger audiences like children in elementary school, but for grade 8 students like myself and up, this book should be perfectly fine. The author takes you on a journey into the lives of Black American minority communities and gives us a glimpse of the trials as well as the tribulations that they have to face. The book clearly shows us white privilege versus the lack of Black privilege in this book and lets us experience it. We watch as Star faces issues that come along with the color and the economic divide in the United States. And so, I think that everyone who can should give The Hate You Give a read, because it forces us to open our eyes, see things clearly, possibly change our perspective about things, and be grateful for what we have in our lives.